Waiters, what Valentine Day disasters have you witnessed? I saw a couple have a full-blown argument in the middle of the restaurant. The woman stood up, took her ring off, threw it at him and walked out. The man continued his meal, had dessert and then paid the bill, left a pretty big tip for the inconvenience and left. 2 failed marriage proposals on the same Valentine's Day. The first one simply said no, I can't do this, and walked out. The second one stared like a deer frozen in the headlights for an excruciating 30 seconds before muttering, "Let's talk about this later." They stayed for the rest of their 6-course V-Day special dinner, eating and making painful small talk. It wasn't disastrous for the couple as much as it was the restaurant. I used to work at a small southeastern franchise restaurant. It wasn't anything you could mistake for upscale. We had someone call in and ask if we could fry the ring he was planning to propose within a hush puppy. Extremely weird request, but we said sure. They come in to eat with their families. She gets her order of hush puppies, doesn't choke on the ring, and seems excited enough. Stayed at the table for about 2 hours total and chatted. They dined and dashed. Edit. Had no idea there would be a ton of confusion over what a hush puppy was. In America, or at least the South, a hush puppy is a fried ball of cornmeal. I promise it tastes better than what it sounds like. Also, for all those asking, it was a place called the Shrimp Basket. It's a pretty small franchise. Sorry to break the hearts of all those that were guessing Waffle House or Captain D's. I walked up to a table and was about to drop off the bill, caught the end of it's over. Guy looked at me dead in the eye and said to split that duck and check right now. Not really a disaster, but this guy came in and said he was waiting for his date. He stayed for 5 hours waiting and she never showed. He eventually ordered for himself and asked that I remove the other glass of water from the table. He said it was their first date. Not a total disaster, but still not good. Had a table of 2 people, probably in their mid-40s last year. Took 45 minutes for this couple to get their entrees due to our kitchen being way too slammed. When they were dropped at the table, they immediately asked for to-go boxes because they told their babysitter they'd be home by a certain time. I overheard the wife say, "Well, I guess this is why we don't celebrate Valentine's Day." The worst part was that they weren't angry, just very sad. My personal feelings about dining out on Valentine's Day aside, I felt so horrible that this couple clearly had put in an effort to have a nice night with each other only to have it go that way. We comped their meals, BTW. Edit to clear up some timing issues. I should have added more context to this the first time but wanted to keep it simple. They made a reservation but unfortunately got seated about 10 minutes late. They ordered a round of drinks while looking over the menu, then a salad course, and then entrees. So at the point their entrees arrived, they had already been in the restaurant for close to an hour and a half. Saw a couple have a full-on argument at a restaurant. I wasn't their server, but the table was directly in the center of the restaurant and they were certainly loud enough for everyone to hear. My manager kindly asked them to leave and the guy's response was to yell, "I've been wanting to do that shit for 2 years now," and stormed out. I was working as a waitress in a sushi restaurant and Valentine's Day was an all-hands-on-deck shift. This guy I had just started seeing wanted to go out, but I told him that working in food service, you never get Valentine's Day off and we'd just have to celebrate the day after or the weekend after. Nope. He got so upset that he went and asked a different girl out, came to the restaurant I worked at on the day and sat in my section. He then proceeded to spend the entire evening making a fool out of himself and making his date uncomfortable as he tried to make me jealous. Needless to say, we didn't go out again. It was like a movie. I was bartending at an Italian restaurant, not a fancy one, but still, and it's pretty much full of Valentine's dates. A guy walks in and sits at the bar by himself, looking pretty down. He asked for a whiskey, so I poured it, told him it was on the house because he looked like he needed it. He proceeds to tell me his story. He had come to the city to surprise his girlfriend for Valentine's, about a 5-hour bus trip between cities, and he sure surprised her. She was in her dorm room ducking one of his friends from high school. He didn't know what to do, so he just walked into the first place that sold alcohol. I spilled as much whiskey as he wanted and watched the Raptors with him. Never saw him again. It's cliche, but it happened. Edit. Watch the Raptors isn't a euphemism. We watched the basketball game. Back when I served food at one of those super touristy seafood restaurants, I worked a Valentine's Day double shift. For lunch, this younger couple came in celebrating their 1-year anniversary. I offer my congratulations and proceed to do my usual spiel before taking orders. The girl is looking more and more dismayed the longer I talk. Finally, I get to the end and ask if there are any allergies. She looks directly at her boyfriend and states, "Yes, I'm allergic to fish and shellfish," then looks over at me very sad. I made sure every aspect of her meal was fine for her. But it was that look of "we've been dating a year and he still takes me to a restaurant that could kill me" that really did it for me. Happened to my poor coworker. A guy and his date came in for Valentine's Day. They had a great time, ate a lot of food, drank a lot of wine, and got along really well with my coworker who was their server. About 2 months later, they come back in and request my coworker again, who happily says yes to serving them. He goes up and greets them. The guy introduces his wife to him, and my coworker mentions something about how much he enjoyed serving them on Valentine's Day. They go quiet. Wife gets up and leaves. Guy just lowers his head. Turns out he had brought his mistress in on Valentine's Day, but my coworker didn't realize he was with a different woman this time around, so didn't think anything of it. We never saw the guy again. Not really much of a disaster, but last year my work called me up. "Hey buddy, we know you're single. Can you come in as an extra shift tonight?" He proposed. She said no. He cried and tried to change her mind for 20 minutes while she sat there stony-faced. She finally got up and walked out. He paid and left in tears. Was a server at a popular seafood chain that isn't very fancy, but when you live in a town like the one I worked in, that sort of place is the nicest place to go for Valentine's Day. Well, the night was incredibly busy when a couple came in. They were upset after waiting 45 minutes for a table, and they were complaining quite a lot. The woman was decked out in a super nice dress and fox fur coat that was actually very realistic. Well, she was sat and served her frozen drink. She goes to lift the glass to her mouth, and inexplicably, the bottom of the cup simply breaks and the drink is spilled all over her dress and nice coat. Was unfortunate. Edit. To everyone asking about the restaurant, yes, it's a place you'll think it is. Red Lobster is a wild place. Younger couple came in for what I can only assume was a first date. Ordered a pizza but never ate. Caught up in conversation, I guess. Guy must have been feeling confident. Busy. About 2 hours in, he gets up, goes to the bathroom, and then decides to sit next to her in the booth rather than across from her where he was before. I swear to you, she then got up and used the restroom about 10 minutes later, and when she came back, decided it would best if they didn't sit next to each other and sat in his original place. Please refrain from doing this. Edit. Feels like I've answered 1,000 times, so here. No, there's in my eyes nothing wrong with sitting next to your date rather than across. I realize that as long as you're comfortable with it, you can do whatever. Who cares what people think? The awkward part is that he moved next to her and she decided to move to the different side in response. Long story short, please don't make me watch an unnecessary awkward situation. You can always, maybe, ask if it's cool if you move next to them before you do it. Not my table, but back in my Olive Garden days, we had a man who looked to be in his mid-twenties tap his empty wine glass with a fork to call for attention of the surrounding strangers, then get down on one knee with silver band in hand and ask his girlfriend/date to accept this promise ring. She looked horrified start to finish. Thank you for watching.